Welcome, everybody, to our December meeting. Let me just access the agenda here real quick. All right. Let's go ahead and get started with you, Holly, with your staff report and minutes and financials.
Sure. Staff report. So first of all, I know, so my boss, Director of Economic and Sustainable Development, just had his 2-on-1 with the mayor and deputy mayor, and they just wanted to express their gratitude and their excitement over the Trades Garage opening that we had on Friday. So thanks to all of you who could be there and who helped contribute to that. I think everybody was really pleased with it, and I know Esteban had a great time. For city report, it is the end of the year here. We are making a mad dash to encumber funds. That's really where the energy at the city is right now. And so among that is Arpa Funds. So I think as many of you probably know, we got some unexpected ARPA funds for the arts at the city for FY21. We didn't think those were going to come to us. They just kind of fell into our laps. And we also got an additional set of funds that will kick in for FY22. So right now I am in the process of encumbering those FY21 ARPA funds so we can still have them available to use for FY22. I think just like with, I think because this money was expected and because there was this period of transition between Sean and me, there just wasn't time to do really, to put a lot of creative thought into how best to spend these funds. So one thing I'm going to be doing at the beginning of the year is just thinking really strategically about how we can best use those funds. And I will definitely be asking all of you for help in thinking those options through. Again, I think this is going to be a really good opportunity for us to be able to give funds to artists and art groups in the community that just really aren't at the table now, like including these emerging artists that we've been talking about trying to get more contact with so we can give them money. So that's something I'll be talking with you all about in the new year. The other thing that is very top on my plate right now is the Waldron reopening. So we are on board to reopen that facility in January 2022. Right now I'm working with Alex and the director of the facilities just to finish all of these capital repairs that the Waldron Task Force recommended back in May. So that's, we've completed all the renovations to the windows. So the windows, they look great now. We had to do some roof repairs. We're finishing up upgrades to the HVAC system that make it compliant with Actors Equity Association. So everybody can feel as safe as they can when they come back into the building. And so we can get even more performance groups in there. So those who are members of the Actors Equity Association can be in the space. So again, those repairs are on track. The city will be running the facility kind of with a skeleton crew for the first 6 months of 2022. Me, and I'll be working with BCT to bring in some tech and front of house support. So the users who had previously requested to use the space, specifically the auditorium for the first 6 months of the year, can actually get in there and do their performances. For many of these groups that include, oh, here's Elliot, Cardinal Stage, BPP, and others, this is going to be one of the first in-person performances they've been able to do since the pandemic hit. So it's really exciting that we get to honor that. The first events that we're going to do at the Waldron is January 7th. We're going to release a press release about this next week. And this is going to be kind of an event that serves two purposes. Number one, it's going to just celebrate the reopening of the entire facility. The second thing it's going to do is it's going to celebrate the 29th anniversary of long-term resident WFHB. So what I've been doing over the course of the past month or so is collaborating with WFHB to plan what that opening is going to look like. We're doing a real deep dive into that starting at the end of this week. We have a 2-hour meeting scheduled for Friday, and then we're going to try to just get the programming for that all in line by end of week next Friday, just acknowledging that everybody is going on vacation and it's just nobody's going to want to be able to do anything before we all get back here in January. I am hoping to ask you all in early January, as we're putting together promotional materials for this, to just help make sure we're getting the word out. I think this is a really important event. I think the city and all of the artists and arts organizations and audience members they've invested a lot in this. I get calls and emails about the status of this every day. So I just want to make sure everybody knows about it and everybody knows to come. Luckily, this will align with January Gallery Walk. So people will already be out and about and kind of primed to come see art things. So as the details for this become much more solid over the course of the next week and a half, I will share back with you. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about that now.
Yeah, and if you can add that to the calendar and add everybody to the event, that way we can all block it and try our best to be there. Right now, that is my intention, but as we know, having more and more people attend is better.
Yeah. Babette, to answer your question, yes, I am intending to work with a couple of the historic users of the Waldron, including the Bloomington Photography Club, to get some art up on the walls. I am for long-term plans of the gallery. The visual arts gallery in the Waldron will remain visual arts galleries. A cafe is not going to swallow that space, as somebody proposed, a while ago. It's just a matter of working with the organization who is most likely going to take over management of this facility in July to make the management plan of who is going to be scheduling those exhibits. And so basically the management group has been working with arts leaders in the community, including Martha Moore from Farr Gallery, Betsy Sturrett from the Grunwald Gallery, Ed Commentali from the Cook Center, and Adam Nahas from Artisan Alley and the Artists Alliance of Greatest Bloomington. We've all been working together to make sure that we have the right management model, the right schedule, to make sure that we are giving access to local artists to show their work in that space, and making sure that we were having a manager in place so we can pay them a good wage to just facilitate all of this. Because the Waldron will be under the City of Bloomington's management for the first 6 months, I'm also working with that group of arts leaders to kind of plan for a couple of exhibitions in those first 6 months. So my intention is to do something in February, have that run through April, and then open something new in April that runs through the rest of the city's management of the facility. I'm working with a couple colleagues at the city in hopes of being able to do a show that honors Black History Month beginning in February. So I think that will be the first show, including artists like local artist Larissa Danielle, whose work is like collage and focuses on people of color and disables people inability to access certain things. So I will keep you posted on that. And if anybody ever wants to take time to meet with me to give me input about how I can run this efficiently and equitably, I invite you. This is still a community that I am learning, and I want to make sure everybody feels like they have a voice at the table as we're scheduling the exhibition space.
And also to suggest artists.
Correct, yes. Thanks. That's what I've got for Thank you. That's what I've got for the director's report or the staff report. I'm not sure, Bryony, if you want to do the approval of the minutes.
Sure. Did everybody have a chance to review the minutes from our meeting back in November? They were much shorter than they used to be, so I hope you did. Any comments, suggestions, changes? Karen?
I noticed that they didn't include the members who were present, which generally is on the minutes. So just for consistency, we probably should do that. The rest looks great though.
That's on me. Thank you. I can add that.
All right. I move to approve the minutes after the names of those who had attended the meeting are added. Any seconds?
I second.
Okay, so let's go ahead and vote. Karen?
Yes.
Nick? You've got voice somewhere.
Yes. Sorry.
Rachel?
Yes.
Babette?
Yes.
Elliot?
Yes, and I am on my phone now.
Okay. Liz?
Yes.
All right. And an update on the financials?
Okay, I'm just gonna quickly share my screen. Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so as usual, we have two funds. The first that you see is that 402 Municipal Arts. That is the just over 60K for our fall cycle of BAC, BUEA grants. This is the BAC grants, the BUA funds of 40K are separate from this. So this will represent most of the chunk of the funds we're going to be getting out in the next few weeks to the awardees of our fall grant cycle. Unfortunately, the applicant pool for the fall cycle was small. So we're going to have some funds left over. So basically, we're in the process of just asking the mayor to assure us that we will have these funds back in our pocket to spend as a new cycle for the next fiscal year. I'm confident that he will do that. I'm not anticipating much pushback there. And then the second line is this Arts Commission Operations Grant. Again, this is for things to pay people like Windfall Dance when they do an awesome performance that we commission. So again, this fund of $39.61.65 will go down by about 500 once that invoice is processed. They sent me their invoice today. I have no fear that we will not get this out by the end of the year. That's where we are there. Any questions about that?
Nope.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right. And moving down on the agenda, are we good to go ahead and invite our guests for the day? Holly, as far as you know?
Yes, I think we'll be good. Okay.
Hi, Galena. And Elliot?
Yeah,
We-
I'm back, fully back. Thanks.
All right, does everybody hear Elliot okay?
Can you hear me okay or no?
That's better, actually.
Okay, cool, great, yeah, wild times.
right.
So I guess.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Galena and I, my colleague Galena, who's the assistant curator of European and American art at the Eskenazi Museum, and myself, the curator of contemporary art, wearing my other hat tonight, would like to share with you a little bit about a exhibition that will be opening up next year in the summer and continuing through the fall. Galena, is there anything you want to add before we launch in?
No, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to present this to you all. But are you able to pull up our slides, Elliot?
Yeah, let me do that now. I finally did get back. So I'm going to share my screen for a little bit of PowerPoint images, and yeah, we'll just begin.
Yep.
And thank you everyone for fielding this, and also for the various reschedules that were required. Let me share my desktop, and I will present in just a moment. Cool. Do we all see that?
Yep, looks good.
Cool. And now I can no longer see you, so.
Well, I'm happy to get us started, Elliot. So the exhibition that is opening in July of next year is called Positive Fragmentation, from the collection of the Jordan D. Schnitzer and his Family Foundation, which is an organization that travels exhibitions throughout the country. It's the largest private collection of prints in the world. But before Elliot really describes that exhibition and its content in depth, I wanted to give a little bit of context about another project at the museum that I'm working on that sort of explains why Elliot and I are co-curating this exhibition. So as Elliot mentioned, I'm the assistant curator of European and American art at the museum. That means that I help oversee a collection of about 4,500 objects made between the 11th century and 1989. So it's a broad collection. It's basically everything on the first floor of the museum. But I'm also the managing editor of an online, it's an online research database launching later this month called A Space of Their Own. So the idea is that it's going to be a repository for records and information about women artists. It's going to include biographical details, images of their most important works, histories, their sort of timelines of their careers, and then crucially, sort of networks of their cooperation and collaboration. So you'll be able to see the way that these networks between women artists, particularly European women artists in the early modern period, start to pop up. The founding director of this project is a specialist in early modern European art. So and that's Dr. Heidi Gelt, who some of you may know. She's the director emerita of the museum and also was a longtime faculty member at IU in art history. Her specialty is early modern European painting. And so you'll find that the initial launch of this website will really be focused on women sculptors, painters, printmakers, and other kinds of artists working in Europe and the United States between the 16th and the 19th century. So a fairly narrow focus, but our hope is that in time, and our intention and plan is that in time, this database will really grow to be representative of all cultures and inclusive of all centuries, including our present moment. So our goal for the expansion of this database is why I'm also working on positive fragmentation. So the idea is that eventually this database will include a record for every woman artist in our collection, but we're also going to start creating records for every artist, every woman artist whose work enters our building, even if it's just as a loan. It's going to be a lot quicker to get things to sort of build out this database if we're able to incorporate those objects that come to our building as loans. And so positive fragmentation is an exhibition comprised entirely of women artists, and all of those women artists will enter this database, and that will really be the first test of our strategy. So here's an example of one of the records that's going to go live. Obviously not a contemporary woman artist, but so you can get a little bit of a sense of the kinds of information that's going to be available. So the real impetus for this work is a survey of our collection. So these are stats from the National Museum of Women in the Arts that found that the 18 largest art museums in the United States found their collections to be 87% male, 85% white. I would venture to guess, I'm still in the midst of a sort of manual survey of our collection. I think our numbers will be slightly below that. I think we're underperforming as compared to that data. And then while there's this sort of idea that we've all become enlightened and that we're all buying work by women artists, still over the last decade, only 11% of acquisitions at 26 major museums were of work by women artists. So we're hoping to close that gap. Elliot will probably mention some of the acquisitions that will accompany this project. But in the meantime, a really easy, it's not really easy, a really cheap way to get the work of women artists more visible through this online database is to start including all of the women artists whose work goes on view as part of traveling and temporary exhibitions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Galina. And indeed, Galina was laughing when she said cheap, and I think it's something that we, or at least I often neglect to say, is that this exhibition is what we call a box show or a traveling show. So the show, as Galina mentioned, is put together by from the Jordan Schnitzer collection by curators at the National Museum for Women in the Arts. And it travels, and we're the second venue. And the checklist, which is to say the list of artists and artworks that are in the show, is preset. Some lenders of shows are more willing to allow an expansion or contraction of that list. With this particular show, we're fairly set on who we're able to include under the theme, which is positive fragmentation, which is the title of the show. It's a fairly generous title or expansive title. One might even say vague, but it comes from a quotation from an essay that a important feminist contemporary art critic, Lucy Lepard, wrote. And she was trying to kind of piece together these different aspects of practices by women artists, female identifying artists that she had noticed. And she theorized this idea that women artists, in part because of maybe the fragmentary nature of their perspectives or their experiences or the many different roles they play, had a kind of diverse array of practices that could employ the idea of fragmentation. So the taking apart of things, but also the kind of reconstruction of them is really the idea. So that positive aspect is about reconstructing perspectives and ideas. And so there are different sort of themes to that in the exhibition, and then there are different aspects of the exhibition that we'd like to highlight. Abstraction is a really key one. Maybe obviously abstraction, whether that's just kind of in this sense a more kind of a figurative abstraction where there are figures, but the landscape and the structure of the composition is rather abstract. This is a work by Cecily Brown, who's British. Most of the artists in the show are American, but a few come from outside the United States. So a kind of maybe more straightforward from a conceptual sense idea of abstraction, of fragmentation is abstraction. Another maybe more conceptual based abstraction is this work here by Nicola Lopez called Urban Transformation 2. And she's thinking about the urban environment, and as she says here, a kind of exaggerating and reconfiguring of urban signs to produce this wonder and vertigo that is the urban experience in the 21st century. We're hoping, actually we should say, to bring Nicola Lopez, who's a faculty at Columbia as well, to speak when she's here, and we'll have more updates on programming, as well as we're of course very interested in your ideas around programming or groups to engage around specific kinds of programs. So figurative fragmentation is I think also a really significant theme of this exhibition. So the taking apart and the fragmentation of the body, particularly the female body, and either the reconfiguration of that into new and fantastic figures, or in the case of this Louise Bourgeois print, this dry point print, the repetition of this study of an ear over and over and over again, with looks like maybe a kind of piercing in it. It's unclear. On the right is Louise herself behind or in front of an image, a large blown-up image of another work that's in the show, which you can see is a female figure being pierced by arrows. If you're not familiar with Bourgeois's work, the bodily figure is an important part of quite a bit of it. This show contains a number of her dry points and etchings. And there are other artists too who kind of take that figurative approach that we might see in a few slides, if I remember. Another artist I'm really excited about having in the show is Nicole Eisenman. She is a painter. She's based in New York now. And this is her on the left in front of two of her canvases. She takes these really kind of mundane scenes of like drinking in dive bars, of partying, of sleeping late in the case of this painting over her shoulder on the right there, and paints them at this really grand scale, more kind of fitting for like historical painting or paintings of a kind of more significant genre. And the works in this exhibition are a series called Peekabah filters. which essentially kind of appropriate the idea of like a Snapchat or like Instagram face filter. You can see the way that the composition is sort of rectangled off in a vertical portrait orientation, like the aspect ratio and scale of a cell phone screen, and how her face has sort of been overlaid with these strange signs and markings. And there are a number of other pieces in the show that have the same composition with different kind of filtrations on it. There are also a lot of conceptual approaches to fragmentation in the show, or at least a few. And so the idea of a kind of conceptual approach is, as it says, the concept. So the idea that the idea maybe matters more than the image or the figure or the body. Jenny Holzer is included in this exhibition to great effect with a number of these 17 by 17 inch prints called inflammatory essays. They are these kind of decontextualized, fragmented text pieces that are quite strong and sometimes strident in their tone, but totally divorced of the context and really any kind of particular meaning. And so Glenn and I are thinking about, because there are a lot of these in the exhibition, we're thinking about maybe interspersing them throughout the other pieces, so as to not kind of bunch them up, but to actually fragment the fragments even more. I should say we haven't seen the show yet. We're hoping to see it in the new year if Omicron doesn't just change everything. Another important aspect of the exhibition, so a hugely important aspect of the show to us in particular, is that all 21 of the artists in the show are female identifying. And this gets back to the statistic and the analysis that Galina presented at the beginning, which is that our museum, like many museums in the United States and arguably probably the world, is really poor in the equity of its demographics, whether that's gender identity, sexuality, and certainly race as well. So a subset of this show that is exciting is works by women of color. So on the left, this is a work by Lorna Simpson, who's a really wonderful and significant sort of photo conceptual artist who takes images of the Black female body and composes them, collages them, often with textual elements that are poetic, evocative, kind of strange. And so there are a number of her works in the exhibition that are quite exciting, including one that I think is printed on felt, which should be really interesting to see. We have a work by Lorna Simpson in our collection, but it's a small sculpture, which is a strange piece for her because it's very very different than what she's typically known for. On the right is a work by is Wangechi Mutu, the artist, and then a work by Wangechi Mutu called The Histology of Different Classes of Uterine Tumors. This is a series of work by Mutu. I should say, first of all, I'm really excited about Wangechi being in the exhibition. She's Kenyan born. She again lives and works in New York. And she's for about a decade now has really been at the forefront of this kind of Afrofuturist movement in contemporary art and in contemporary culture more broadly, which is this idea of sort of powerful, fantastic and phantasmagoric female figures that occupy a kind of imaginary, sci-fi infused world of total liberation. So the idea that it's in the future, which is to say maybe a future where women and Black women are liberated, and that future is kind of cyborg or hybrid or of a different character than the world as we know it today. Has spent a lot of time doing collages, so taking like fashion magazines and oftentimes National Geographics and medical illustrations and putting them together to make these figures. In this case, she's depicting a kind of a series of medical illustrations that have been turned into these sort of fearsome feminine faces that stare back at you, using these illustrations of, as it says, uterine tumors. We're in the process of hopefully acquiring a pretty exciting print by Wangechi that is not related to this series, but I wanted to mention it, and hopefully it'll be on display in the museum around the same time. Another artist who we're really excited about is Micheline Thomas. She's from Camden, New Jersey. She grew up in a lot of ways, I think, her work is very autobiographical and relates to her experience growing up as a queer woman who didn't really see a lot of that identity in the world around her. And so she makes these really incredible interior scenes. They're usually involving kind of domestic interiors that are fragmented and collaged, sometimes with like rhinestones and like really shiny acrylic paint. And female figures. In this case, they're photographic figures that are reproduced along with woodblock printing and screen printing and other mixed media modes. And this piece here, Sleep de Femme Noire, is related to the work on the bottom left by Gustave Courbet. And so she's taken these kind of bourgeois white women and replaced them with Black women, so changing a kind of white male fantasy of women into her own kind of actual autobiographical experience of being a queer Black woman. Julie Moreto is another exciting artist. She was born in Ethiopia, and she creates these really large-scale abstract pieces that sometimes look like graffiti, sometimes look like kind of complex data visualization. She attributes her kind of process of scumbling and scribbling and drawing to this approach of kind of mapping history and the evolution of art, architecture, design. She's also thinking about really urgent ideas around migration, climate change, flows of bodies, of temperature in the world. And so there'll be a few large pieces by her in the exhibition as well. And then lastly, I'm not sure, but another artist I'm really excited about, still hoping to maybe bring to Bloomington, is Wendy Redstar. She is indigenous of the Crow tribe, and she's been making work for a long time now, and really focuses on her identity as a Crow woman growing up in a Native context, but also operating as an American in the world of the kind of colonial America. And so this piece here is a nice print by her where she's taken, the background sort of appears to be a traditional indigenous pattern, and on the front of it, she's placed this image of a vehicle that's also covered in indigenous fabrics. So the image in the vehicle is a Crow Nation parade where they display these fabrics and drive their vehicles around the reservation as part of a celebration. And that image is overlaid on top of these textures, which are taken from a Pendleton blanket design, I believe, which itself is a company that often appropriates indigenous blanket or indigenous designs in its production of fleeces and blankets, etc., consumed a lot by upper class white folks. And so she's kind of playing with this idea of high and low art and upending expectations, and producing the sense of fragmentation between her experience on the reservation and a kind of idealized and maybe even sort of reductive idea of what it means to be indigenous in the United States. So I sure there's lots more to say, Galina. I kind of blew through that, but if you have any thoughts or comments about what I presented or revisions.
No, not at all. That's terrific. This last slide is just, but I think you mentioned it, Elliot, to reiterate that this was organized by the National Museum of Women in the Arts, although the content of the exhibition is derived from the Schnitzer Foundation. So we're also seeing this really as an opportunity for starting out, sort of forging new partnerships and new collaborations. Obviously, Elliot has worked with the Schnitzer Foundation before, if you remember his Leonardo Drew exhibition. But this will be the first time, to my knowledge, that our museum has collaborated with the National Museum of Women in the Arts, of course, a natural partner going forward, given our institution's new focus on work by women artists.
Yeah, so that's the gist of it. And we're very happy just to hear responses, any works that stand out or artists that stand out of interest, or any ideas of communities that we should reach out to more directly from here. Or any questions, of course.
Commissioners?
I was going to ask, well, thank you both for presenting. I'm very excited to go see the exhibition, but also curious about what's already in the works for public programs, particularly when it comes to the graduate students. As both of you know, that's my personal interest.
So we have in hand, although not finalized, so not yet ready for public distribution, a sort of plan from our education team that includes a range of programmings from sort of the public events where you're going to bring your kids, and then all the way up to those sort of specialized course-connected experiences for IU students. I can tell you that we are reaching out directly to faculty in the art history department, as well as in the the studio printmaking departments at IU, to make sure that their courses are looped in on this upcoming project, and to make sure that student engagement in this project is at the highest possible level.
Thank you.
And then Elliot's able to talk more about it because he oversees our visiting artist series. But we do have plans, I think he mentioned Nicola Lopez, to invite artists to come speak who are featured in the exhibition.
Yeah, that is the kind of the kind of most obvious programmatic activity from my perspective, doing the visiting artist series. So we're making those connections and reaching out now. It's tough with COVID. And people want to be back in person. People aren't always available in person or not sure about the future. So we're still a little bit in flux with that program, but that is an element that we will definitely pursue. So that would look like ideally 2 to 3 artist talks, either in person or hybrid or virtual in the fall.
Any other questions or comments?
I just think it looks very exciting, and I'm delighted to see anything that emphasizes the lost women of art over the centuries.
Thanks, Babette. Yeah. I'm curious, I'm just kind of curious too what anyone's experience of the museum is, even more generally, maybe. This show is a focus of ours right now, but Galina and I are also thinking more broadly about public engagement and the museum being set apart from the rest of the Bloomington community. So just curious about any observations you have about the museum, if you visited it, how you find it to be as well.
Elliot, I was in the museum multiple times a month, and almost each week as a docent, etc. And I have to say that since this whole thing with COVID, the docent program has more or less fallen apart, and community engagement, has just fallen through the wayside. And just when we think we're going to get everybody's going to get back, and I was starting to plan all these programs for the winter months. Now, who knows what we're hit with. So it's hard to do this, and I think that just hanging in there and having new programs, and hopefully, on the Thursday nights, and hopefully people will just get back into a habit that we had, that we lost. So I don't think it's anyone's fault. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah, to that point, I miss the docents at the museum.
Yeah, we do too.
I can report that there sort of will be changes coming soon, and we're hoping to have more docents leading in-person tours. It's true that due to COVID restrictions, especially the policies in place via IU, we're limited in the programming we can do. I did want to note that our attendance is actually not down. So we just closed the Glenn Close exhibition, the costume highlights in the costume collection. That was the highest attended exhibition in the museum's history. I'm happy to report too that over 2/3 of our visitors to that exhibition were first-time visitors to the museum. So our hope is that we attracted a new audience. Of those visitors to the Glenn Close exhibition, 90% visited at least one other gallery in the museum. So they didn't just, like we all feared, walk through the front door, go look at Glenn Close, talk about how they loved Fatal Attraction, look at Corella, and walk out. They spent time walking through the other galleries. So our hope is that as people do start to feel more comfortable going outside, maybe that will be in the spring or maybe summer, that there'll be people sitting around thinking, oh, we had so much fun at the Glenn Close exhibition. I wonder what's up at the museum now. And then they'll be able to come and see this project that Elliot and I will have on view beginning in July. But we miss the docents, so come back soon when you're able.
I really loved the Glenn Close exhibit, and it ran over really well with all my acquaintances. I know a lot of people who actually traveled to Bloomington specifically to see that exhibition. Admittedly, I'm a costumer, so it does fit my interests, but a lot of people came in to see that in particular and were really blown away by it. And also we went to a lot of the additional programming related to the exhibit, and I thought those were all really very well done. And I think I really enjoyed that one. I thought it was very successful. And honestly, the Sage collection has a ton of treasures along the lines. It's not just the Glenn Close collection over there that they have at the Sage collection offices. And it's a really great resource, I think.
Actually, it seems like so long ago, but I certainly saw the Glenn Close exhibit and took everybody who came to town. It was phenomenal. It was very exciting.
And Helen wants to know if there's any programming specific to younger audiences, especially kind of high school and below.
Right, so we have a full-time educator at the museum whose entire job is pre-K through 12. So she is working to develop programming around this exhibition for those audiences. I know that we'll be continuing our Letters to a Young Artist series that Elliot has collaborated with our education team on before. So our hope is that we'll be able to bring in, we have not yet returned to school visits. I think that that's related to policies in the school district, not to our own policies. Previously, every second grader in Monroe County comes to the museum every year. And so our hope is that that will be back in place by fall 2022, and that this exhibition can be one of the things they come to see at the museum.
Yeah, and Kelly's amazing, and the Notes to a Young Artist series is essentially where we ask an artist to it's really lo-fi, on their phone or their computer, record very briefly a minute or two of advice they would give to themselves as a young artist, or reflections. And Kelly is awesome. She's great. And sometimes there's a kind of like response to it. That material is used in different ways for different age groups, but it's pretty cool. And it's really fun, and it's a unique program that we ask them to do specifically with us. I just love it. Yeah.
I think there's an opportunity with high schoolers who often feel left out. I've had conversations with several of them, and they're like, there's a lot for IU students, there's a lot for the younger kids, but we kind of get left behind. And you also have the unique opportunity to tap into their independence. They do not all require mom or dad or guardian or somebody to drive them, or the school to organize a field trip. There should be something for them that you can come up with that would foster their interest, their creativity, and curiosity while taking advantage of their age.
I had, oh, sorry, Ellie.
Oh, you go ahead, Rachel. I'll go after you.
I was just going to ask one other, because you both did such a nice job of outlining how this exhibition will be a way to remediate some of the inequality in the museum's collection. And I wondered if, one, there's any data on the museum's visitorship that also speaks to potentially the inequality of who is benefiting from these shows. And then because, you touched on Julie Moreto, Wangechi Mutu, Lorna Simpson, and Wendy Red Star, I wondered if, will the First Nations Educational and Cultural Center on campus be looped in? Will African Studies, or what are the, in terms of the racial aspect, how have, what are the plans for kind of broadening the scope in that sense?
So the museum has a strategic plan that relates to DEIA, and that plan is being executed through a variety of committees. Both Elliot and I are on the audience committee, among others. Everyone's on multiple committees. And the audience committee is really tasked with exactly what you asked about, Rachel, this idea of figuring out who is coming to the museum. Is that representative of Bloomington, Southern Indiana? And how do we make sure that people know that we're here and get them in the door? So the data that I have about Glenn Close is incidental insofar as COVID required us to put the front, if you've been in the museum since we reopened, there's a desk at the front. And our guest services associates ask, have you been to the museum before? Is this your first time? So that's how we're able to glean that very narrow data. They're not collecting demographic data. And I also personally believe they should not be tasked with doing that. That's something that people need to be trained to do. We are working both with the sociology department at IU and with outside research firms to develop a strategy for doing a visitor survey that's going to give us a baseline to move forward to think about how can we be more expansive in our audience. In terms of collaboration with both on-campus and off-campus groups to make sure that people know about this exhibition and its content, I'm really hoping that we can have your help in that. We have a list of organizations, both on campus and in the community, who we think that we should be meeting with and talking to about this exhibition. We have contacts for some of those, but I'd be so grateful if we could circulate a list to you. And even if you just know, you used to live down the street from someone who works at First Nation office at IU, those little connections can really help get our email read to say, oh, so-and-so suggested that I get in touch with you. That also, I think, helps make people feel really included and considered. So my hope is that we can send that list to you after this meeting, and that you can sort of comb through and drop in any contacts you might have. And that's going to help us with the next phase of this sort of community outreach component.
Thank you.
And then I think my question, and I think I'm just going to tell you a lot of things, kind of piggybacks on what Rachel said just about expanding your audience. One conversation I have over and over as I'm meeting visual arts community members is about town and gown and, the barrier, blah, blah. And so I'm really trying to work to get in touch with new people to, who, are not the usual suspects to get out. So I'm happy to help cross promote to them as I'm meeting those people. I'm actually doing a presentation at the Rotary Club tomorrow. So I'm happy to bring this up then, but also just keep in contact with them as, we're getting closer to the date of the show when you're publicizing programs around it. I'm happy, this is definitely more art centric, so not the unusual suspects, but Arts Forward Bloomington. I'm also presenting to them tomorrow. So I'm happy to share it with them. And their Facebook page is really cool in that if you are a member of that group and they just have this running spreadsheet of members and they share email addresses, it's a little insane. But so you have access to those people and the organizations that they represent. And then you can also just post events on their Facebook page. And again, because I'm kind of a known quantity in that group and we're trying to be BFFs right now, I'm happy to help share information on that page. I'm thinking too, and you might all be thinking about these groups, but I feel like over the past few grant cycles, a lot of women-focused art groups have applied for grants. So, and I don't want to pigeonhole too much, like this is not just an exhibition for women, you know, it's for everyone, but thinking about if you wanted to get like these groups who are already talking about issues around being a female artist anyway, I think it would be great to just make sure you're sharing information about the shows with them, and also potentially, and again, this is your decision, not mine, but inviting them to come into the galleries and do like, you know, I know some of them do, you know, reading groups or like writing circles. That might be a good thing to organize with. I'm wondering too, if you've thought at all about working with the Monroe County Public Library for any cross promotion or programming. Again, I met with them yesterday and was just absolutely blown away by the amount of programming they're doing around Black History Month from the beginning of February through March. It's amazing, and they are committed to do it. I'm just absolutely blown away by the quality of the work that they're doing and the artists that they're bringing in. It's just absolutely amazing. They're hyped to work. Blown away. And then finally, I'll say, I think another group that I can help connect you with is actually, it's an internal department. It's community and family resources, but they also have a lot of connections with community members and really focus on advertising events and programs that they feel like once you're a resident in Bloomington, what are the things that your family can do to enjoy themselves and feel enriched? So I think helping to facilitate a connection there to help them get the word out about this to the residents in the city that they're working with, I think could also be a really good option. So.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you so much for those leads. I'll be sure to, I've made note of those, and I'll be sure to circulate our existing list to you all. So any help you can offer with those, it sounds like we're not going to have too few emails to write in the weeks ahead. So.
All right, any final comments or words? Okay, Galina, there's one more message for you in the chat room. That you can catch up on for after. And if you need her contact information, let us know. I'm sure she'd be happy to share.
Yeah.
Terrific, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing not only the challenge that the museum is facing, like many other museums, but the work that you're actually doing in order to rectify that. And we look forward to hearing more details and visiting the museum and seeing what you're all up to in the upcoming months.
Great, yeah, thank you again for the opportunity to present. I imagine Elliot's staying on the call, but please also know that all of you should feel free anytime to email me. My information's all on the museum website. So even if it's silly things like, oh, I remember that lady said French painting and my mom loves Monet, like I got you on the tour. So I can do all those sorts of things as well, but please keep me in mind if you need a sort of museum curator who's not Elliot. You also have me. So
sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Galina.
Thank you all so much. Have a nice evening, rest of your meeting.
Yeah.
All right. This part of the agenda took a little bit longer, but I thought it was very interesting and it deserved the time allotted. So I took out some things out of our agenda just to make sure that we finish at 6:30, but those are things that are not as timely, so we're good. Let's go ahead and Nick and Holly, if you can give us updates on the 1%.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Elliot. We've had 2 dedications, 2 ribbon cuttings since our last meeting. Thank you, Bryony, for running point on Switchyard Park. Everything went well there. Had a high school student who gave a reading that was part of the programming. And sounds like that all went well. As mentioned earlier, the Trades Garage opening was just last Friday. That felt great. The artist Esteban Garcia Bravo hung out for a while afterwards. Had a good time with a few of us. He just seemed over the moon about things, and so it felt really great. You know, Holly worked out the stipend for the Windfall dancers. They seemed really happy with things. Yeah, all in all, it felt good to kind of put a bow on a couple of these things that have been in works for quite a while. And so jumping to another big one, 4th Street Garage. It is happening. The installation is in progress now. The south facade, or sorry, the north facade facing the Waldron and WFHB is fully up, and installation is happening now along the west facade. So far so good. If you haven't been by, I definitely check it out. I know, Holly, anything you want to add on 4th Street?
Working with the mayor's office right now to determine when we're going to do a ribbon cutting ceremony for this, but hopefully we'll have a little respite to like take the time to do something super duper cool. So more to be announced soon there, but yeah, they're working really hard to have the garage done by December 17th. We've really upset the Board of Public Works in the past couple of days, but we're working through it as far as just boom cranes going out into street lanes they shouldn't be in, but we're back in compliance now, so but it's growing great, and I'm really excited to do another really engaging public performance of some sort to activate that space.
Cool. Yeah, and then jumping to the Trades Gateway project, Holly is working out some legal details with Larry Allen with the city to dissolve the Ignition Arts contract, which everyone is on board with, and then get into seeking out a new fabricator sometime early next year. I think we've mentioned previously, but the artist Stefan Reese is no longer doing a US residency that was sort of dictating some of our ideal timeline to overlap with. So there's a little bit more flexibility. Obviously, we will still want to get the project fabricated and installed next year, but we have a little bit more runway to work with to figure that out. And then Holly, you want to speak briefly? There's not much to say here, but with the hospital, the old hospital redevelopment site, I mean, just as Holly's going to meetings and trying to make sure we're in on the ground floor, but we're just not quite there yet in the process.
Yeah. So we're still figuring things out there. And so, and I just met with my colleagues here in Economic and Sustainable Development today just to talk about this. We kind of all agreed, you know, the city is kind of working through some issues about sites and just what's happening with these different structures. And so it's just not the moment for myself or my sustainability colleague or small business colleague to be super duper vocal on these meetings, but we are present at these meetings so they know that we are there. I anticipate there is going to be some movement over like the next 6 weeks, 8 weeks, to get us past this kind of like lump of conversations that like arts, they're not ready for arts at this point. And at that point, I'll just start being really vocal about, but wait, what is the budget for the arts? And what is that 1% of? And where is the art gonna go? So more to report on in the new year on that one.
Great. So I think that covers 1% projects. You know, so I guess before I jump to the next couple points on the agenda, any questions or comments on any of that? Anybody?
Moving right along.
I'm excited to learn more about other fabricators in Indiana, because when I first moved here, I was given through my work at the museum under the impression that Ignition Arts was pretty much the only game in town. So I'm looking forward to exploring those other options.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And so when I was like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to, you know, terminate this contract, that was one of my first questions, is who else is going to do the work for us? Because I'm like, as a newbie to the city, it was also my first impression that Ignition Arts was the only fabricator at the table. But I know Esteban had an excellent experience working with Weber. Like the first day of that install, I was waiting for someone to call me at 6 a.m. and tell me something was wrong. And it just went so smoothly. I could not believe it. They hit their deadlines. It just kind of it was amazing. So they're definitely at the table. I have also been in conversation with Sean Starowitz and Lucas Brown, who was the architect who collaborated with the structural engineer to kind of hone down the initial larger scope of Stefan's project to make it really manageable within the budget that we gave him. And so in speaking with Lucas, he's also had some great recommendations about Indiana-based fabricators who can help us with this. So once the legal department and I have really just finally resolved the contract with Ignition Arts, at that point we'll begin contacting these other recommended fabricators and finding the best one, and making a determination about who will be the best fit for this project and who will be the best fit for working with Stefan.
Does this need to be a public call, or can you just reach out?
That's a great question. And that is a question I have that's kind of lingering out there that I feel like legal is not ready to answer for me yet. I think it's going to be a matter of us terminating the agreement with Ignition Arts, getting through the end of the year. Legal is swamped right now, and then kind of readdressing what the steps are going to be to find this new fabricator in the new year. But I will definitely keep you all posted, and I guess we can talk once I learn this, what the BAC's role will be in selecting that new fabricator.
Yeah, just to see if that's some review process that we need to get involved with or not. But you'll let us know. No, there's no rush.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay. Then moving along with our agenda, the public art master plan. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just curious about one thing. With the project with the garage, did we come in below budget, on budget, or I didn't realize how much the size was going to be reduced.
Yeah, this was something, and I can't recall what meeting it was discussed in. It was something that Sean had flagged previously. You know, we weren't in a position to significantly increase budget. The thing that we ran into, as I understand it, is obviously the aluminum being one of many items where costs, material costs have skyrocketed over the last couple of years. I think one point of frustration that that Sean had just with the series of approvals and just sort of bureaucracy with the project. He certainly wished that material orders would have been made earlier. You know, when we were a little bit lower on the cost curve as things have continued to increase, but there was a revised rendering based on like the size adjustments that needed to be made that I know we discussed in one of these meetings. I'd have to look back at minutes and see how long ago that was. It was at some point in the last 6 months.
Oh, I remember that. I wasn't talking about the 4th Street because actually when I drove by it and I only saw it from the side, I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't think, if I had known it was reduced, I don't think I would have acknowledged that. So I actually thought it looked terrific. And
yeah. I mean,
I was nervous about that, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. I was sort of working with the same, I don't know, kind of recalibrating my perspective on things, right? You know, because I had the original, you know, renderings in my mind for so long. It was, you know, I had to acknowledge when I first looked, I was like, it's a little smaller than I wish it was. But I think when you sort of step back and look at the building in context, and I think particularly in context with what else exists in this town, you know, parking structures and what we've done in the past, I personally think it looks really great.
Yeah, I did too. No, it was the other garage, and the artwork. To me, it looks significantly smaller than I thought it was going to be. Now, maybe it was just in my mind or not, and that was all 3D, correct? So
yeah,
and I just was curious.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to go back and look at like what details we had when, but it's in scale, I think, with what I expected. You know,
I think it's more of how the rendering was presented. It looked more ominous, and if you may, because it was surrounded by darkness that visually just makes the art piece larger to your mind's eye. But the sizing and the scope of it does match word by word what was drafted the entire time. I think it's just a matter of seeing it surrounded by light versus the darkness of the rendering.
Interesting point. I just think in the future, I personally have to be more aware of that. That wasn't something I was looking at, and I think it looks really nice, but it seems it felt small to me for what I was expecting in my mind. So
yeah, no, I think that's interesting perspective. I mean, you know, when I was, you know, preparing some like my brief comments for the opening, you know, I was looking back at Esteban's original, I guess, original final proposal
yes,
that we reviewed amongst other finalists. And, you know, I think in the imagery there is sort of what Brian is referring to. You know, I think there's like a pretty large panel that's sort of glowing and surrounded by darkness. And, you know, I'd have to double check and see if that particular rendering, you know, how that compares to what was ultimately delivered. But I think that there were points in the process where, you know, Esteban communicated scale of the pieces, how many tiles there would be, size of the tiles. And so at least to the extent that Sean was engaged in the project and conversations I recall, you know, we may not have had renderings that place them sort of on the wall in scale. I'm not sure if we ever got that or if we ever circulated it, but I think at least the details of the pieces were followed through on. You know, the other thing I'll mention, and I said this to Esteban and a couple people on Friday, is for as much as some of these projects can shift and change, it actually is fair. To me, it's kind of remarkable how close Esteban's original concept is to
yes,
what was created. You know, it's, and I think that was part of why we were drawn to it. Is it was very easy for us to sort of visualize and imagine, you know, how it could turn out. So I think considering this is, if I'm correct, his first permanent public art installation, you know, I think it's you know, a credit to him that it was a concept that could be executed that effectively. Yeah, but I think that is good feedback, Babette. You know, I think as we work through more of these projects, especially where there's opportunities for revisions, things like that, you know, I think we always have to balance, you know, what we want to see from artists to make sure that we're getting exactly what we're expecting versus, you know, the work we're asking them to do for the fee, you know, that they're ultimately being paid as an artist, and especially with material costs, you know, things like that, where we sometimes end up sort of tight on this budget. But I think that's really good feedback for, you know, for how we might want to, you know, ask questions, you know, once we put so much effort into selecting an artist, right? And once that selection is done, you know, I think making sure that, yeah, we're continuing to keep tabs on those details.
And it might be helpful, Holly, and I call out your name because you would be doing the kind of site visits with the artist and the fabricators and things. Just if we get kind of progress photos or something to give us a sense of what to expect in the end, that might be helpful as well.
Yeah, I think it would have been very easy for him to have presented to us, because he has it all in CAD, what to scale what it would have been. And again, I'm not saying that it's bad or anything. I'm just saying that it was a surprise to me, and that we shouldn't be surprised. You know, in the future, it could end up being something, you know, that could be not good. So just as a matter of process.
Got it.
Yeah, that makes
I
sense.
do want us to move on a little bit. I want to make
Yep.
sure that we cover grants, which is an important aspect for today. And we only have about 16 minutes left.
So
So
to just
Nick, continue.
very, very quickly, public art master plan, Bryony and I exchanged a couple emails, and she helped put together, sort of the lingering to-do list. Her availability and mine are sort of inverted this month, but I am going to have a couple weeks where I'm not working, and I'm going to be sitting around my house, and I'm going to try to knock out as much of that as possible, so that we can tidy it up in the month of January, when we're all sort of getting back to normal. And then Holly also provided the update, the Near West Side Mural, neighborhood mural project. Laura Burkmanis is excited to take on the project. She's working on, getting invoicing together and things like that, and getting a contract in place, so this could be completed next year. And then a few other projects that have been mentioned: the Hidden Rivers downtown project, the bike garage, People's Park adjacent mural, and the Rogers Family Farm, aka the Goat Farm space that I think we talked about last month. RFQs for all of those will be in the works at the top of next year, January, February, March, hopefully posting in first quarter.
Nick, can I kind of request that the next couple of meetings for the Public Art Committee be focused on how we can streamline the RFQ process and the submission of artists?
Sure.
Just that there's been a lot of conversations about how to kind of make it easier and more cohesive, if it's a Google form or what, so that everybody's answering the same questions kind of thing.
Sure.
So just something to consider as we go into a new cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Holly, did you want to say something?
This is kind of jumping to grants, but the city is going to contract with an entity to have grant software. Woohoo! So I feel like this might be something that we can also, the RFQs for these public art projects might be something that we can incorporate into that software, just to make the application form individuals are filling out less of a headache. So that's something we can also, I'm anticipating, this is like a fund that we had to encumber before the end of the year. So this is a software that I'm hoping will be implemented very early on in 2022. So we can think about how that, whatever information we determine we need when people are applying to these calls can be aligned with in our grants funding software. So.
Do we know the name of the software so that we can start to familiarize ourselves?
You're gonna hate me for what I'm gonna tell you. It's SurveyMonkey, because
okay.
The other, we looked at a couple larger scale, like grants management specific firms.
Seriously?
Yeah, and their the projected budgets they put into place for us were just way too large. And so, and the initiative to get grant software is specific to my department. It is not a citywide venture. So a lot of these larger groups that we were talking with about giving us software are just really gauged towards organizations where granting is the, like, one of the primary purposes that they exist for. They're doing multiple calls at a much higher level than we here at Economic and Sustainable Development are. So we're like, okay, we're smaller scale, our budget is smaller. Let's start with SurveyMonkey, see where that gets us, and then kind of reassess. So
no, that sounds perfect to me, because then I am somewhat familiar with it. And just as we start to strategize how we're going to go through this process and what are the questions that we want to ask, knowing what the system is helps formulate that. Perfect. Anything else for public art? All right, let's go ahead and move over to grants, where I want to focus on two parts. Holly, do you want to give us an update on wrapping up the cycle. I know you've been sending out emails.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So like I showed at the beginning of the meeting, unfortunately our grant applicant pool was small this cycle. I think as I've been reflecting on this, I think there are a few factors that contributed to this fact. And I'd like to work with the grant subcommittee in the coming year just to figure out how we can kind of reassess and reposition ourselves just to make sure we're getting the word out, making sure that the operations like time that people can apply in makes more sense, things like that. But so in all, we had 26 applicants. Most of them were for arts projects applications, only 2 for emerging artists, and then I think about 7 for operations fund. Of those 26 applicants, we awarded 17, and we awarded anywhere from 500 for the emerging artists up to 5,000 for the organizations who were applying for operational funds. In all, we awarded about $35,000 of funding. So what I want to acknowledge is that is a very small chunk of a much larger pool of money we were given to do this. So if you all recall, overall, we were given $100,000 to spend for this cycle. And again, that was $60,000 coming from the city as part of their Recover Forward initiative, as part of like an off-cycle opportunity. And then there were $40,000 of BUEA funding for arts zone grants. So I'm in the process right now, again, like I said at the beginning of the meeting, Elliot got to hear this conversation. I was at the BUA board meeting this morning, just asking them to please, please, please let us keep those funds for next year. They're pretty much on board, so I feel good about that. And now we're also making a memo to the mayor's office to make sure that we can keep the remaining funds from that $60,000 so we can do a new grant cycle in 2022 to continue allocating those funds. I feel like when the city gives us money to spend on arts, we need to do our best to spend it. So I'm really excited to look for new opportunities and look for new entities to give this money to in the new year.
And just to clarify, of those applicants, some of them did not qualify for funds because they were operational and they had applied the last cycle. So we unfortunately could not grant them.
Correct.
And then of those who we could grant, we couldn't just give them as much money as we wanted. There are limitations on funding up to 5% of their operational budget, and for project, I think the cap is 2,000. So we cannot, we could not give away more money just because we have the money.
Right.
We have to find a different grant cycle and other use for that money. So we do want to give out those funds, but we were limited. We gave out as much as we could based on the applications that we received.
Yeah, thank you. And for all of those who did not receive awards who applied, I have been in conversation with all of them, and I'll be meeting with them all to give them feedback about how they can make stronger applications for the next cycle. And I'll of course be in contact with all of them once we have details and schedules for the oncoming cycles so they can be sure to apply and we can ultimately hopefully give them some money.
Karen?
Dumb question. Are these funds, do they have to be designated toward grants, or could they be designated toward other projects as well?
That's a great question, and it's not one I have the answer to off the top of my head. It is a question that has been in my mind, as I'm kind of like, oh my God, it's the end of the year, and oh my gosh, these are all the cool things I would like to try to do in FY 2022. So I think if I had the blessing from the commission to think about options that go beyond the traditional style of grants, I'd be happy to bring some options to the table that aren't grants that we could all discuss, but I would definitely want it to be an initiative that we're all behind.
Which brings me to the next chapter of grants. As we all know, Essence is leaving. This is her last meeting and she's still in class, I assume, so she won't be able to join us. And I've had several conversations with several members of the commission, and one person has stepped up and said, I'm willing to take on grants in the next chapter of grants, and that is Elliot. So I want to bring it over to the commission. One, Elliot, I don't know if you want to say anything, but most of all, make sure that you're all okay with that, have a vote, and if so, welcome Elliot as the new chair for the grants committee. Elliot.
Thanks, Brittany. I've been on both sides of the grant writing process in my decade plus time in the professional institutionalized arts. Written a few, earned a few, evaluated many, and I've become to realize again after this being, I think, maybe my fourth grant cycle reading, I enjoy it, strangely. So I nominate myself, or however this works.
And I think we're in a moment where we've spent so much time focused on the grant application and what are we asking and all of the kind of logistical side that we've lost sight of actually engaging with the community and really strategizing how to allocate these funds. So it's an interesting moment to kind of rethink how we break down the money throughout the year. How are we going to approach the community? How all of these things, because the questions we know are nailed down. We've been working on those for 3 years. We might make some adjustments, but at this point, I think we can let those be and really focus on reaching out. So, do anybody have any questions or comments for Elliot before we vote him in?
I would just like to say, Elliot, bless your heart for doing this. And if you need any help with community engagement, it'd be my pleasure.
I would really appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, it's a strange, I saw Hassan Minaj speak last night, and he said what did he say? Something like, your passion isn't the same as your gift. And I think I don't necessarily have a passion for grants, but I certainly might have a gift for reading lots of them. So.
And where's Essence going?
Essence, she's not going anywhere. She just has too much on her plate and no longer cannot be on the commission anymore.
Good.
She just wanted to finish this grant cycle.
Mm-hmm. I think we should just give her a special thank you, because I know how hard she worked on everything, and I know it weighed very heavily on her.
Yes, I was hoping she would be able to join us even if late, and that's why grants is at the end of the agenda. But I will make sure that I reach out to her and touch base. Mm-hmm. All right, well, I motion that we vote Elliot as our grants chair committee, our grants committee chair, sorry, order of words. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Karen?
Absolutely.
Rachel?
Yes.
Babette?
Absolutely.
Nick?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
All right. Well, while Elliot absorbs this information, I am going to give everybody a little bit of homework for the holidays, and that is just think about what you would like to see in grants as we move forward. What do you think is needed, or what kind of, especially kind of like a structural point of view? Anything that you want to pass on to Elliot as he takes this on in the new year. Just ideas, as always, are more than welcome. Anything else on grants, Holly?
I think we're good for now. Thanks.
All right. Well, a big clap for Elliot.
Yeah, yay. Karen, did you have something to add?
I was just thinking that as we are kind of contemplating some new ideas for grants and community engagement and some other things, I think a really good place to start is going back to that strategic plan that we worked so hard on. And I wonder if there are some little points there that we haven't really addressed as much as we wanted to, and we should sort of think about filling in those places where we've been a little light before. Just my 2 cents.
Great point. Yep. Everybody, another bit of homework. Go and read the strategic plan again.
Yeah.
You know, Bryony, maybe
Yes.
we could set up a time that would not be, you know, during one of these meetings, just an informal discussion about community engagement for, you know, everybody's kind of in different communities, and that we could just brainstorm on it.
Sure. Look, I'll send something
After
out
the
in the
first
new year.
year. Yeah.
Yeah, we can do that. All right. We have 2 minutes to spare, so let's go on to commissioner announcements. And I will just mention that we started this month, but with Gallery Walk and the Esteban's event, some of us managed to get together and did a little bit of walking around, and then ended up having dinner, and that was lovely. So I encourage everybody on the commission to consider joining whenever possible to do a little gallery walk, informal, get a drink or dinner, or just head home after a little bit. Any other commissioner announcements? Nothing for today. And we lost Chaz, so that was our one community or public comment. I'm sure you can all check the FAR website. There's going to be some workshops coming up for sure, and all kinds of events. So in lieu of Chaz not being here, I'll send you all to the website, and that is it with 30 seconds to spare.
I swear.
All right. There'll be a few more things on the agenda in January that we didn't talk about today. And other than that, have a great holiday season. And we'll see you all back in January unless we have a committee meeting before then.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Stay warm.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.